Here's an exercise on negative powers. And this one is just a little bit tricky because the negative power applies to a fraction which is itself on the bottom of a bigger fraction. And that can lead to a mistake, which I will help you avoid. Now, if you recall, a negative power means 1 over. It means you have to find the reciprocal of whatever number it applies to. And in this case, there are 2 ways to accomplish the 1 over part. First, you could apply this negative power to this fraction, which means you have to find the reciprocal of this fraction. And how do you find the reciprocal of a fraction? Well, you flip it. You switch the numerator and the denominator. So in that case, you'll end up with 3/2 squared. Alternatively, you could take this entire expression, which is being affected by this negative sign, and move it to the top, but with a positive power. So in this case, you'll end up with 2/3 squared on top. Now, either one of those actions is correct, but doing both would be a mistake, because doing both would amount to using this negative sign twice. So what you should do is choose one and proceed. What I will do is move this entire expression to the top, but with the positive power. So what I'll do now is show you how the calculation unfolds, and then I'll come back and say some useful words about avoiding the mistake of doing both actions together. So the denominator with the negative power will move to the top with the positive power, 2/3 squared on top. So we won't even have a big fraction anymore. We'll just have 3 squared times 2/3 squared. All right. Now, of course, this power applies to both the numerator and the denominator. So we have 2 squared over 3 squared. 3 squared and 3 squared cancel, and we're left with 2 squared, which is 4. Problem solved. So now, let me say a few words about avoiding the mistake of both flipping this fraction and bringing the entire denominator to the top. And the key to avoiding this mistake is recognizing the structure of the algebraic expressions you're working with. For example, in my interpretation, what I saw was a big fraction where on top there was 3 squared, of course, and on the bottom there was something to the power of -2. Now, it didn't matter that that something was a fraction. That wasn't important. What I saw was some number to the power of -2. And when there's a number to a negative power in the denominator of a fraction, it ends up on top with a positive power. So all I did was recognize something to the power of -2, and then I brought that something intact to the top with a positive power. I ignored the fact that this was a fraction. It wasn't important. In fact, it was important to ignore that fact, because doing so, I had no chance to even consider flipping this fraction. I ignored the fact that it was a fraction. And so I ended up taking this number to a negative power from the bottom to the top with a positive power, and the mistake was avoided. In the alternative interpretation, where you deal with this first, you ignore the fact that it's on the bottom of a bigger fraction. All you're saying is that I'm looking at this expression and I see a fraction to a negative power. And when I see something like that, it doesn't matter where it is, whether it's on top of a fraction, on the bottom of a fraction, or somewhere else all by itself. When you see a fraction with a negative power, what you do is you flip the fraction and make the power positive. And that helps you deal with the negative sign. And in that interpretation, you wouldn't even consider bringing it to the top, because you're ignoring the fact that all of this action is happening on the bottom of a bigger fraction. You just focus on this expression by itself, which you should always do, and you deal with it as you should with a fraction to a negative power. You flip it, it becomes 3/2 squared. Then you'll continue recognizing that it's a fraction to a power, and perhaps you'll say it's 3 squared divided by 2 squared, at which point you'll have to take a step back and recognize that this fraction, which is now 3 squared over 2 squared, is actually on the bottom of a bigger fraction, and deal with it accordingly. And you'll end up with 2 squared over 3 squared on top. And the rest of the analysis will be the same. So whether you choose one approach or the other, it's important to focus, like I said, on the structure of the expression you're working with. And if you do that, you'll avoid this and many other mistakes in algebra. Hey, thanks for watching. Click on this logo to check out our complete SAT math platform. And if you know someone studying for the SATs, please let them know about it. Thank you. Hey, got it on the very first try.